couple months ago, several of us got together and trying to decide what we were going to talk about, kind of the history of the Bristol Opera House. What I want to talk about tonight, there's a lot of history with the Bristol Opera House, the Mosier Opera House. We're only going to cover probably 25 years of it tonight, and hopefully we'll do another program later, but we'll get the Opera House to the end of World War I anyway. So with that, here's a picture of the Bristol Opera House that is current, maybe a little more current than some of the other ones you're going to see, but that's how it stands. We're going to go back, and a lot of you have seen this map, and it's one of my favorite maps, so I brought it into this program tonight. This is the original town of Bristol in 1890. This is what the streets of Bristol looked like in 1890. And if you look here, follow the arrows a little bit, right here you see it says Bank and Store. That's the Hilbish building. That had the Hilbish store and the Bristol Bank. That's actually the Redbird today. Next door to it, number 4, is a building called the Gould Building, and that is where the Masons would meet in 1890. Across the street at the Feinholt Building, which when I was growing up was the Congdon's drugstore, that's where the post office was at that time. And if you look up here, there's an empty lot, lot number 6, and then lot number 5 is where the parking lot is today, the Bristol parking lot alongside the Redbird. That's what it looked like in 1890. This picture, I didn't have any pictures that showing the buildings uptown in early 1890s as they were, but this is approximately 1910. The Opera House is completely done. Right here, of course, is the Hilbish building, the Redbird building. Here's the Gould building that I was talking about, where the Masons met. And if you take a look at this, here's something that I was kind of proud of myself for figuring it out. It's something that maybe most of you already know, but I didn't know. This building, the Bristol Opera House, was built in 2 pieces. Cyrus Mosier, which was the editor of the Bristol Banner, the original, and your great-grandpa, from what I understand, he built this part of the building right here. The original building was this squared-off building right here, to about where this white line is. And we'll back up a little bit, and you'll see it's kind of like the same structure of these 2 buildings right here. Cyrus Mosier built this building, this west half, in 1892 of the Bristol Opera House to serve as the post office on the bottom and the Mason Lodge up above. In 1896 and 97, Cyrus's son Horace, which would be Pink's grandfather, joined with Cyrus and built the rest of the Opera House on. So this was built, the east half was built in 1896 and 1897. The west half was built in 1892. The west half cost $2,400 to build, and the east half cost $7,600 to build. So they invested $10,000 in building Bristol Opera House, yes. The east part of the building, right over here, was contracted to a gentleman by the name of Mr. Whitmer from Goshen, and he was the one who saw the building of the Opera House itself, that what we think of as the Opera House. At the same time, you had the west half going. In 1897, the first play was put on. Thursday, May 27th, 1897. On this date, the Bristol Opera House celebrated the grand opening with the HMS Pinafore. That was put on by a drama group from Elkhart, I believe. And the original intent of building the Opera House was to bring entertainment to town. Very soon after they were done building it, they weren't even done yet, they had their first play. Here's a review. Opening of the Mosier Opera House. The Opera House opening by the Aryans on Thursday evening was a very brilliant event, although the hall was not complete owing to the too limited time between the completion of the carpentry work and the early date set for the opening. Yet it presents a very beautiful appearance, and when the finish of the hall and stage is perfect, it will be one of the neatest and most complete houses to be found among the lesser towns in the county. That's how it was looked at that particular time. At the same time that they were beginning to put plays on in the Opera House, the stage part of the Opera House, I'll call it the east side, they were continuing to hold lodge meetings. The Knights of Pythias would meet up above the post office, and along with the Masons and eventually the Order of the Eastern Star. The hall and stage provided a great place for box socials, banquets, church gatherings, band concerts. They would hold debates there, school functions, reading of literature, and small theatrical productions. In 1897 or 1899, the Opera House Orchestra played for a grand masked ball that was held in, this was only 2 years after it was completed. Here's one of the first plays. This is out of 1898 Bristol Banner. This was a local group that put this on. When they finished the Opera House, suddenly it became a place for the Bristol schools to hold their activities. The commencements would be held there, plays would be held there. Anything that was a gathering from the school, where they formerly had it at the Hilbish Hall above the Redbird today. They went to the Opera House, Mosier Opera House, and here is a annual commencement program from 1902, and to be held at the Mosier Opera House Friday evening, May 9th, 1902. Here's another part of that commencement program. This is something that was part of Earl Congdon's. Here's a very poor picture of the 1914 graduation set up at the Bristol Opera House. You can see this chair set up there, but that was in 1914. And then this is a headline out of the Bristol Banner. In 1917, the Mosier family were quite involved with the school. This was quite a spread in this paper telling about holding the commencement at the Opera House. For many years in the early 1900s, the building was used as a place to assemble for national holidays. It was this is, in my opinion, this time in Bristol was one of the most exciting times there was an awful lot going on. Okay, so they held the commencements and other school activities, theatrical plays at the Opera House, but also it was a great source of pride to hold the national holidays there. And there were as many as 25 Civil War veterans on the stage from the Grand Army of the Republic on Memorial Day. This was right after the turn of the century. According to Bruce Mosier, one of the veterans was Dick Scamahorn's grandfather, who was injured at Gettysburg. Like I said, the Masons originally met at the Gould building on the west side of the Hilbish Hall. Once they got this opened up, they would hold their meetings in the lodge hall up above the post office. They had a wood stove up there. Wood was stacked in the hallways. Probably wouldn't get away with that today, but back then that's how they heated that particular building. Here's a picture of the rural mail carriers that worked out of the post office in the west half of the Opera House. That's one of my favorite pictures that we've run across. The lighting in the Opera House itself, the stage, was mostly reflective kerosene lights. They had a large chandelier with kerosene lamps that hung up above the stage. Lighting was very dim. Even after electricity come through, it was still fairly dim. The one selling point of the Bristol Opera House was the tremendous acoustics. Silent movies don't come along until just prior to World War I, but back in the early 1908, 1909, they weren't really movies, they were more film strips. And they would show them and play music along with them. It wasn't the silent pictures that we think of today, but that was 10 years prior to the movies. The majority of the plays were put on by local drama clubs. We'll talk about some of the people who were involved with the drama clubs a little later on. But the drama club went by 4 different names during the time period from, say, 1900 until 1920. It was known as the Home Drama Club, and then it was known as the Bristol Dramatic Club, then the Bristol Home Talent Club, and finally the Bristol Players. And a lot of the local Bristol people were involved in the drama club. And we'll hear some of those names here in just a little bit. The building itself housed more than just the stage and the theater. Of course, it had the post office, it had barber shop. There were lawyer offices in there. There was a doctor's office in there. And at one time, there was a restaurant in there. There were other towns nearby that had drama clubs that would come and put some of their plays on at the Bristol Opera House. And those ones that were mentioned in several of the books was a drama club from Union, Michigan, Middlebury, and Elkhart, Indiana. The Elkhart Club probably was the largest and probably put the most shows on. On April 20th of the year 1901, an Elkhart Club put on the play Faust. If you're a movie buff like I am, you saw them put the play Faust on in the movie Tombstone. And they showed parts of that. That actually took place, Tombstone was set in the year 1881. That's 20 years prior to when the movie Faust, or the play Faust, was put on at the Bristol Opera House. And that the play Faust put on by the Elkhart Drama Club received rave reviews. It was actually, they were actually called back for a second production of that play, which didn't happen very often back then. Most of the plays were shown for a week, over a weekend, and then they moved on to another play. 7 months after the play Faust was shown at the Bristol Opera House, which was shown in April 20th of 1901. 7 months later, on November 12, 1901, the town of Bristol was held under a siege very similar to the news, like it was in Tombstone. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit. The best way to talk about that is the newspaper clipping that was in the Daily Times News in Goshen, told the story of the robbery that hit Bristol in 1901. Amanda found this newspaper clipping for me, And I've edited it a little bit. It goes on a little bit, but it'll tell you a little bit what happened. And this happened in, like I say, 1901. So the story reads, Bristol last night was the scene of an operation of one of the boldest gangs of safe blowers and robbers that have ever visited this section of the state. Notwithstanding a fusillade of shots exchanged by several citizens and the robbers, they continued to operate upon the post office safe for an hour and a half, making in all about 10 explosions. Finally wrecking the safe and incidentally the front of the building, securing $200 in cash and between $400 and $500 in stamps, which included all the cash and stamps in the safe. So they blew the whole wall of that building to the left out there when they blew this safe. A party of robbers was variously estimated by the citizens who saw them at work from 4 to 6 persons. They were detected at their work about 11:30 at the time of the first explosion. The post office is situated in the west room of the Mosier Opera House block. Ed and Wallace Bickle, whose hardware store is just across the street from the post office, and who live over the store with their mother, were the first citizens awakened, and whose attention was attracted by the work of the robbers. They looked out of the window and, seeing what was going on, opened fire with the robbers with a revolver. I like the spunk of that. The robbers returned the fire with a shotgun loaded with fine bird shot. This exchange of courtesies continued for probably half an hour until the Bickle brothers run out of ammunition. They had fired between 15 and 20 shots. They had no way of replenishing their store of ammunition except for exposing themselves to the fire of the robbers. Mrs. Bickle, their mother, stepped in the window during the lull in the shooting and, being seen by the safe blowers, was made the target of a shot, 3 of the little leaden pellets taking effect in one of her arms. So she was actually hit by one of the blasts from the shotgun. During the progress of the firing, Ray Shaner, age about 20 years, who lives about a block from the post office. Now, as best I could figure, if he lived a block from the post office, he probably lived in one of those little buildings where the parking lot is today, just west of the Redbird. He lives a block from the post office and upstairs, stepped out upon the balcony and fired in the direction of the post office. I don't like that. The desperados returned his fire and one shot struck Mr. Shaner in the nose. So he got hit with a shot of bird shot too. So there's 2 hits so far. Dr. Barber, who lives almost opposite the post office, went to the telephone and called Sheriff W.O. Elliott in Goshen to inform him of the desperate gang that was holding unlawful possession of the town and terrorizing its citizens. The doctor evidently did not muffle his bell carefully enough and was heard talking, for one of the robbers went to his window and informed him that unless he desisted talking at once, he would shoot him. As the doctor had nearly finished with what he had to tell the sheriff, he very obligingly obeyed the desperado. I like the way they write, too. Sheriff Elliott went to Bristol at 8 o'clock the following morning and found the robbers had first broken into the blacksmith shop of Oliver Johnson, from which a sledgehammer, a punch, a chisel, and pincer, which was used and left in the post office. They had pried the front door open. They pried the front door open to get in it, and then they blew it off when they blew up the dynamite. A pension voucher for $72 was cashed by Postmaster Greenan. Now remember that name, Postmaster Greenan. For Dr. J.E. Barber was among the papers stolen, which may furnish some clue to the identification of the men if the plunder is found or disposed of, and that seems to be the only thing that can be accurately described. Dr. Barber simply got word to the Central to notify Sheriff Elliott, who was not apprised of the seriousness of the attempt at robbery, or he would have responded earlier. That sounds like a good story, too. The town has never had a night watch, and last night was well adapted to the work in hand being very dark. The kerosene lamps had been removed, and the electric light system was not completed yet. If you remember, this was 1901. There were two, from what I could read, there were two electric lights in the town at that point. Neither one of them were there. Two men worked at the safe, and the others stood guard outside. They worked with the light that flashed up brilliantly, frequently. Imagine these were carbide lanterns like Pink was talking about, create a lot of light. Nobody had any flashlights, but they probably had miner's caps. Postmaster L.J. Greenan said this afternoon that he had not completed his estimate of the loss, but it would be around $500. Now that's the story. We had robbers in Bristol. They blew up the Opera House. And Postmaster Greenan was the fellow that was doing the report. A good point was brought up. These people were never caught. The desperados were never caught.
Did you ever catch the other two robberies we had in Bristol? Did you ever catch them?
I don't know about that.
I don't think you did.
Yeah. The thing that got me was they had a party line and they're calling the sheriff in Goshen.
Yeah,
and the guy comes over with a shotgun, tells him to hang up the phone. You know, that could only happen in Bristol. But anyway, he shows up later. They tracked him down the actually the railroad tracks out here by Pine Creek. They found some of the stuff that come out of the safe. And they speculate that the robbers went on to Elkhart and they never found anything. But remember, we're going to get into it. L.J. Greenan was the postmaster. And he was one of the ones that was involved with a lot of the early plays. So we had this robbery took place. He got everything straightened out. Stamps were gone, cash was gone. This was 1901. Now, in 1907, a local drama club put on a Western here in town. Now, it's got a strange name, so we won't rely on that too much. But here is the ad that appeared in the Bristol Banner, 1907. A Western border drama called Black Dick was put on Wednesday evening, February 27th, 1907. And I made a better copy of the cast of characters that were in that particular play. And one of the leads in the play was L.J. Greenan, the postmaster from 6 years prior. And there's an interesting story. It was in one of Bruce's books telling about him. And supposedly in that play, towards the big crash bang finish of the play, somebody jumps up, going to shoot the bad guy, and he shot the wrong guy. And L.J. Greenan jumps up and yells out, Frank, my gosh, Frank, you've shot your father. And the crowd just started roaring when that went on. Well, to add to the confusion, a stagehand was working there, and he wanted to drop the curtain because things went awry. And rather than drop the curtain, he grabbed the rope that dropped the chandelier. And he dropped the chandelier. No, there were no fires, but the chandelier dropped in the middle of the stage, and the crowd absolutely loved it. Now, this took place at the Bristol Opera House, the Mosier Opera House. Horace Mosier, by that time, was running the Bristol Banner along with his father, Cyrus, of course. But he was the owner of the Opera House, and he was also the talent critic for the local newspaper. So he tended to review the local drama clubs a lot, the local troupes a lot more favorably than he did some of the ones coming into town. And he didn't have a bad thing to say about that. The Bristol Banner also knew how to take care of rowdy crowds. Now, you can imagine back during this period of time, there wasn't a whole lot of entertainment that took place throughout the country. The Opera House, the theater, the plays that were put on, the debates, all that, you know, you didn't go home and watch TV, you didn't play on your Game Boys or anything like that. You went to these type of events. Well, you know, not everybody behaves themselves if they don't care what's going on, and evidently, evidently there was a play that didn't go so well, and Horace Mosier wrote in the Bristol Banner the following week: "It has come to the attention of the undersigned that some patrons of the Opera House hold to the opinion that I, as manager of the house, am chargeable with the character of entertainment there produced. This idea I want to correct. The house is rented to whoever cares to pay the rental price for any legitimate purpose, and it is up to the lessee to satisfy those who pay their admission price, not to me." So he doesn't want to hear any BS about how good the play is. "Simply because I am managing the rental of the house, it's certainly no reason why I should be made to stand in the light of one who has recommended a production. Another thing, it must be remembered that what satisfies one mayhap does not satisfy another, and it would be absolutely impossible for anyone to please everyone who buys his way into an entertainment. Furthermore, to one who rents the house is chargeable the decorum of the audience, and certainly not to me the rights and the use of the house having temporarily passed to the lessee for a price. Horace H. Mosier, Manager, Opera House." Now, that was a long way of trying to set people straight for acting up during the opera or during the play. You know, I don't know how many people would have paid much attention, but the next week they would pay attention to what went in the paper. "Notice is hereby given that the undersigned will prosecute any person or persons who indulge in bean or peanut throwing or other acts annoying to the patrons of the Opera House. Legitimate applause is at all times permissible for meritorious stage productions, but loud whistling, catcalling, and loud stamping upon the floor will not be tolerated, and offending persons hereafter will be prosecuted. The surest way to avoid trouble is to abstain from the nuisances named." Now, if you'll notice,
That was my great-grandmother.
that was not written by Horace. That was written by his mom. And I imagine things straightened up at that point. Moms always knows how to take care of that. Now, during that period of time, as we got into 1910, 1912 or so, technology was changing. People were able to go farther. They could go to Elkhart. They could go to Middlebury. They could drive cars. They weren't going on horseback or carriages anymore. So there was quite a people were trying to get the entertainment dollar, and it wasn't just the Opera House wasn't the only place in town doing that. So a lot of things took place. Here's an ad that now this took place outside of the Opera House. They had a real live dog and pony show. "Bigger and better than ever, H.W. Freed's model tent show will exhibit in Bristol on May 8th. Educated dogs, ponies, and mules, acrobats, aerialists, jugglers, see the riding rooster. Admission 15 cents, 25 cents. Now, you know, you don't get to go see a riding rooster everywhere.
I've never been to a dog and pony show.
So, or see a dog and pony show, but you could see one in Bristol about that time. Now, there were lots of things taking place rather than just stage productions. Here's a picture that we have seen earlier. This actually took place at the Mellon Carnival in Bristol in 1909. But the reason I included it is down at the bottom you'll see a little wagon for the McNess Company's remedies. McNess was one of the medicine show type companies. I can remember my grandmother used McNess salve. A Dr. Bowser medicine and Dr. Sharpstein medical company both put on productions. People went to these medicine shows not necessarily to buy the salves and the tonics, but they went there for the free stuff that they handed out and for the entertainment that they got to see. I can imagine Mr. Haney from Green Acres standing up in front of the crowd telling people, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and hand out a bottle of tonic if you went. So that was the medicine shows. The medicine shows, the dog and pony shows were big additions to the plays that were being shown. Another thing that took place at the Opera House during this period of time was the political rallies. Now, I just happened to put a picture of Warren G. Harding in there. He actually ran for president in 1920, so this was a little bit late. But the one Bruce Mosier talks about in his books took place in 1916. Now, he would have been still in school at that time, and that was the election in 1916 between the incumbent Woodrow Wilson and a fellow by the name of Evans, who happened to be the Republican. Now, the town of Elkhart, the Elkhart County and Bristol and all that, tend to lean a little bit towards the Republican side of the ledger on this. But the political rally that took place during this period of time wasn't necessarily for the president. They would have the local politicians who Republicans usually carried the day here in Elkhart County and all that. And one of the things Bruce Mosier talked about quite a little bit at these rallies to keep people stirred up was a thing called shooting off of the anvils. And that intrigued me to death when I heard about that, so I did a little bit of research on that. Now, in Bruce's book, he tells the story about what shooting off the anvils was. They would hold their political rallies inside the Opera House, and they would give speeches to the people who gathered, very patriotic speeches, hooray for our side and to hell with the rest and all that stuff. But they would get up in front of the crowd there, and people would get all wound up. And the way they had it set up was that every time one of the political speakers would say something very patriotic, somebody would wave a flag out the Opera House window. And that signaled the people out in what is the parking lot today to do what's called shooting of an anvil. Now, these anvils, these would weigh, there's two of them here, these anvils would weigh about 100 pounds apiece. Very, very heavy. And they were, of course, designed, you can see the tongues on them. This is where the blacksmith would bend the horseshoes and other metal work. But for this particular purpose, they would turn one upside down, and at the bottom, in order to save weight, there'd be a little cavity in the bottom here. Now, what these fellas would do is fill that full of black gunpowder, and then they would stack the other anvil on top of it and light it and have a fuse set in there. Now, when the fella in the Opera House would wave the flag, the very patriotic thing, they didn't have a lot of fireworks back in that time. You know, they didn't want to fire dynamite off. There wasn't any tannerite at that time to blow the, so they would shoot these anvils. And what they would do is load that full of gunpowder or dynamite fuse. When they would send the signal out there, somebody light the fuse. And the black powder doesn't really explode until it's compressed. And when you've got two anvils on you, you get compressed. This top anvil would fly 75 feet or 100 feet up in the air and come crashing to the ground, but it would make a tremendous roar.
Make the ground shake too.
Yeah, the ground would shake, the buildings, what windows there were, it was just a tremendous blast. Now, black powder, yeah, there's probably dents up there where these things landed. Now, like I said, black powder isn't terrifically combustible, but when you put it under pressure, it does this. Now, in Bruce's books, he tells about the people made the foolish mistake of putting the kids in charge of blowing the anvils, shooting the anvils, and he was one of the ones involved with it. They actually, during that particular political rally, they would wave the flag no matter what the guy said, and the kids would blow off the anvil. And the explosions went off so much they actually ruined an anvil. Now I don't know how you would ruin a 120-pound chunk of steel like that, but they certainly did. So I got a big kick out of that. That was if you've never read any of Bruce's books, make sure you do. These books tell a lot of great stories about the town of Bristol. Now, another thing that I found that came to Bristol during that period of time, they would bring magicians to the stage of the opera. Harry Blackstone Sr. was one that was very well known. His son actually became a magician also, and he's enshrined in the Magic Hall of Fame up in Colon, Michigan. But he would come and visit the Opera House. There was a rumor that Houdini came there, but Bruce Mosier said he could never prove that happened. But Thurston, the great magician, and Harry Blackstone Sr. certainly came to the Opera House and put on their plays, or put on their tricks. One of the stories that I read in one of the books is that Blackstone Jr. did a disappearing act, or Blackstone Sr. did a disappearing act on the stage of the Opera House. And they'd put him in a big sack, and then they'd raise the curtain up and cover him up. They'd drop the curtain and he was gone. Well, actually, he had gotten there earlier and he'd cut a hole in the floor, and there was a stepladder underneath there, and that's how he disappeared when that was up there. Now, he had to have a little help doing that, and one of the fellows who was helping with that was named App. So I got a big kick out of reading that. But they helped. There was a lot of people that helped with the different productions that went on. A lot of family, great family people in the town of Bristol. Apps were one. Clark Barney and his family, of course, the Mosiers, and there was all this stuff wasn't possible without the help from the people in town. Now, at the time that Harry Blackstone, Thurston the Magician, and those, they come through town in a program that Horace Mosier had worked to get called the Lyceum program, where they were like a talent agency, this stage of the game. Early on, these programs would bring adult education to town, and they would put on debates, they would put on poetry reading, they would put on educational programs. But as it got a little later into the teens, it was mostly entertainment. And they would bring on singing groups, there would be black minstrel groups involved with that. The magicians were involved with it. You know, we were at a point at that time that there was more and more competition for people's entertainment dollars. So Horace Mosier was doing as best he could to bring plays to town, because otherwise people were leaving and going to the movie theaters that started up in Elkhart and the surrounding bigger towns. And so the competition for the entertainment dollar in Bristol became kind of fierce there for a little while. Here's a thing that was written in the Bristol Banner by the editors. Of course, they were pushing their business at that particular time. This was printed, and I think is indicative of the fact that they were looking for people to spend their money with the local stores. Here's an ad. Doesn't have to do with the Opera House, but this talks about a popular concert being now this would have been around 1917, 1918, at the H.B. App and Sons, the old store downtown that we've talked about before. Not only did they talk about their specials at the store, but they talked that they were having amateur night. And they would give $1 cash to whoever was the best singer, whatever. Well, you could buy, looked like you could buy several pounds of corned beef if you won. But they had another ad in there where H.B. App and Son advertised their straw hats and underwear. And at the same time advertised the concerts, the certain nights that the concerts were. But that again was at the H.B. App Son store. So at that particular time, Mr. Mosier, who was always ahead of the game a little bit, he started advertising, we're bringing motion pictures to Bristol. And this ad would have run in the Bristol Banner about 1917. And the middle of 1917, 1918. I got a big kick out of reading this ad. He said, Mosier Opera House has recently made necessary alterations to the house and is now having constructed an all-steel asbestos-lined motion picture machine booth so as to eliminate the greatest possible degree of any danger of fire. And then he brought the operator from the Hippodrome Theater in Elkhart to run it. So this is about the time, like I said, this is about the time that motion pictures came to Bristol. Now they had slide pictures, still pictures, along with that they would play that along with music and show these slides. This would have been in the late 1908, 9, 10, but they didn't have motion pictures come to Bristol until 1917, 1918. So if you go through the Bristol Banner, you will see several of the ads for motion pictures coming to, I'm sure these were silent movies. Here's one for the July 7th, and I believe this is 1917. The Man from Bitterroot, great 6-reel drama, only one show this week, admission 10 cents to all. The Man from Bitterroot. Here's another one called The Forest Nymph and the End of a Perfect Day. Admission 10 cents to all. Don't forget the time, place, and date. I didn't put it in this deal, but I read in one of these books about the cost involved of putting that motion picture in there. The asbestos-lined booth to show these movies. They spent a lot of money on that for that period of time. The school gymnasium hasn't been built yet. Doesn't get built till 1925. So we're still showing school plays, school commencements. They're involved with that. They're showing silent movies. The production of the plays is not being handled quite as much by local talent anymore. He's bringing other players in. So here's another one, Ruth Stonehouse with Roy Stewart in Follow the Girl, high-class comedy drama at the Mosier Opera House, Saturday evening, January 5th at 8 o'clock. Mirth and pathos, admission 10 cents, plus a 1-cent war tax. This is towards the end of World War I. To get people to come there rather than go to Elkhart or to go to surrounding towns, they were advertising these every week. And here's one that I got a big kick out of, A Tortured Heart, another Fox production. It talks about the evils of village gossiping. There are times I think maybe we need to show that one again. The Mosier Opera House, Saturday, July 14th. And then here is the junior class play put on Friday, January 25th, 1918. Bird's Christmas Carol. That was the Bristol School put that on. Here's a picture, we've seen this one before. This is Horace Mosier, of course, Pink's grandfather. He was very, very much involved in the early entertainment in Bristol, not only as the owner of the Opera House, but as the editor of the Bristol Banner. This is a 1923 Bristol Annual. Of course, the gym hasn't been built yet, but they had a real nice tribute to Horace Mosier. They also had a tribute to the township trustee, Clark Barney. Clark Barney and his wife were in there from the very beginning as far as the local plays. He was involved in all the local drama clubs. Their kid actually even played a lot of the leads in plays when they needed a young kid involved. So he was quite involved with it all the way. I'm getting towards the very end, but I had to, this is one of my all-time favorite pictures that we show as a group here. Of course, here's the Opera House in the background. This is the interurban. This is 1909, 1910, 1911. Downtown Bristol, they're unloading one of the train. Of course, this is Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young posing in the train in front of the Opera House. And you know, this is one of my all-time favorite pictures. So anyway, that's all I had to show tonight. I hope